All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining the special meeting of the Fall River Historical Commission. It is Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. It is 6 p.m. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. May I get a roll call, please?
Ashley DeCunha, present.
Jonathan Lima, present.
Liz DeBlock, present.
Rick Mancini, present.
Connie Soul, present.
Joyce.
Before we go into the presentation, is there any citizens' input for tonight? Okay, thank you. So we have students here from, and Dr. Elaine Stiles from Roger Williams University from the Preservation Studies program. This is in regards to the Steep Brook Form B project, which was originally proposed to the Historical Commission by the late Al Lima, who in his lifetime became a champion of historic preservation here in Fall River. After his passing, the project was moved forward by Rick Mancini, our vice chair, and this is to update the Form Bs, which is a inventory form used by the Massachusetts Historical Commission. In the early 1980s, late 1970s, the city was surveyed as part of the National Park Service's program with the National Register through the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and a lot of the Form Bs have not been updated since. So with new research methods and certainly the digitization of records, we have a greater power to get this information brought to light. And as such, the Massachusetts Historical Commission has also updated their research requirements for the Form Bs. So I would like to turn it over to your group. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves as well, please.
Sure. I'm Elaine Stiles. I have the pleasure of teaching historic preservation at Roger Williams University.
My name is Georgia Seahouse, and I am a grad student in the preservation program.
My name is Erin Lamonaco, and I'm a current senior with a master's in architecture, but also minoring in preservation.
My name is Elizabeth Brown, and I am finishing my first year of the preservation master's program at Roger Williams.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hosting us today, and also to say thank you to Rick Mancini and to Mike Labossiere, who are our points of contact with the City of Fall River on this project. We couldn't have asked for more supportive and enthusiastic partners in this work. Every time we went out in the field with the students, Rick came out to see us and check and see how we were doing, which was excellent. So the work that you're about to see is the product of one of our core classes in the curriculum at Roger Williams University in Historic Preservation. It's our Building and Site Documentation and Research Methods class. And the students did a tremendous amount of work. We have 3 of our students here today representing that work who've just introduced themselves. So thank you for this opportunity to share the work and for giving our students an opportunity to share what they've learned. And I will now turn it over to them.
Thank you.
In the fall of 2023, our Documentation and Research Methods class was tasked with conducting a limited scope cultural resource survey to identify and evaluate potential historic properties in the Steep Brook section of Fall River that may be eligible for the state and national registers of historic places. Our class surveyed 32 total properties. 4 of the selected buildings were already listed on the National Register as part of the Fall River Multiple Resource Area in 1983. And 6 additional buildings were previously surveyed by the Massachusetts Historical Commission in the 1970s. However, all of these buildings lacked sufficient documentation. The remaining 22 buildings we surveyed were selected due to their apparent age, as well as their proximity to both the commercial hub of Steep Brook, located around Wilson Road, and the original Steep Brook settlement north of Wilbur Street. Our class updated or completed Massachusetts Historical Commission building forms for each of the 32 properties, along with National Register of Historic Places criteria statement forms when applicable. The survey process began in September of 2023 with fieldwork in Steep Brook, where we photographed the selected properties. We undertook an investigation of the property's owner and occupancy histories using Fall River City directories, U.S. Census data, and for some properties, deed research. Building permit records were used to investigate properties' physical histories. We also used historic maps and photographs, newspaper articles, and secondary sources to research individual properties, as well as the Steep Brook neighborhood as a whole. These sources were gathered from the Fall River Public Library, the Fall River Registry of Deeds, the North Bristol County Registry of Deeds, the Fall River Building Department, as well as multiple online databases such as Ancestry.com and the Durfee High School's Keeley Library database. The following presentation will begin with an overview of Steep Brook's development and the significant historical contexts associated with the neighborhood. We will then examine the class's survey findings, covering buildings already listed on the National Register, buildings deemed eligible for listing on the National Register, buildings that could contribute to a potential historic district, and buildings of interest. The presentation will conclude with recommendations for further research and planning.
The area of Fall River, now known as Steep Brook, grew and developed as a result of its occupation by native tribes, later European settlement, and its many industries and modes of production made possible by its diverse and rich natural environment. The Steep Brook area was initially inhabited by the Pocasset and Wampanoag tribes before King Philip's War virtually exterminated the groups, paving the way for European settlement soon after Fall River's 1680 settlement. The settlement of Steep Brook mimicked that of previous indigenous inhabitants, resulting in the building along the Taunton River and its tributaries for settlers' reliance on the river for marine food sources, trade, transportation, and fertile agricultural land on the riverbanks. Agriculture was the base of the colonial economy, and Steep Brook acted as a service area to the agricultural land around its post road. Steep Brook is the initial administrative and religious center of Fall River and the site of its first townhouse. During the industrial period, production shifted from Steep Brook to water power sites on the Ketchikan River, resulting in the 1836 relocation of the townhouse from Steep Brook to the new downtown center. This new center for commerce and industry, with a focus on textiles, attracted an influx of Portuguese, Irish, German, and French-Canadian immigrants to work in the mills over the course of the late 19th century. Census research illustrates that some of these immigrants lived in Steep Brook and worked at the local mills, amongst other occupations. This influx sparked a surge in new residential and commercial construction downtown, including a smaller surge in residential construction in Steep Brook in the last quarter of the 19th century. As Steep Brook began to move into the industrial period, its economic focus shifted away from agriculture, and other ventures such as clay mining and ice harvesting became more prominent. Clay was discovered in the beds of Steep Brook in the 1840s by Barnabas Clark, who arranged for it to be mined and shipped to places like the Presby Stove Lining Company in Taunton, where it was turned into fire brick, cupola brick, stoneware, glass tile, blast furnace, and forge bricks. Ice harvesting and dealing had been present in Steep Brook since the early 1800s due to the 3 small ponds in close proximity to the town center, but it wasn't until the industrial period and the demand for transporting perishable goods by rail that the ice harvested in Steep Brook was used by more than just the local Steep Brook residents. Steep Brook is also offered small-scale commerce, such as the Green Dragon Inn, that was opened by Orrin Eddy in the mid-1800s, Barnabas Clark's blacksmith shop, and a wharf built by Job T. Wilson at the end of Wilson Road, where trade ships were constructed and goods local to Steep Brook were shipped to other cities. Early modes of transportation in Steep Brook went hand in hand with the transportation of goods to be traded. From 1738 to the early 19th century, multiple wharves were constructed in the neighborhood, such as Wilson's Wharf, which served as the building sites of many ships and ports, and as ports for ships to engage in local trade. With the advent of steam power, a number of Steep Brook residents became steamboat captains and workers. There were also ferries which transported goods from wharves in Steep Brook in the mid-19th century after the establishment of mills earlier in the century. Other ferries, including the Fall River Line steamships, transported people to various cities in the region, such as New York and Boston. Land transportation began with stagecoaches. The Fall River Stagecoach Services that was started in 1808 took passengers from Fall River to Boston, Providence, and Newport, and had a stop at the Green Dragon Inn at Steep Brook. James H. Wilson began running his steam and electric-powered omnibus service in 1875 to bridge the north and south parts of town until the advent of the electric streetcar. Though most 19th century transportation types were based in downtown Fall River, they branched into the neighborhood of Steep Brook, exemplified by Colonel Richard Borden's 1844 establishment of the Fall River Railroad with a route to Boston that was partially built over Steep Brook. The railroad merged with the Old Colony Railroad in 1854, connecting Fall River to Boston, New Bedford, Cape Cod, and Providence. A station in Steep Brook was established by 1870. These railroad lines were instrumental in the transportation of goods and people. In 1880, Globe Street Railways laid trolley tracks along North Main Street, a service run by both cars and horses until the successful 1892 testing of the electric streetcar. The streetcar lines were used by mill workers, and Fall River residents also used the streetcars to get places of recreation north of the town center in neighborhoods such as Steep Brook, demonstrating the growth of suburbanization and recreation. Recreation in Steep Brook consisted of places such as Forest Hill Gardens, which had an amusement hall, skating rink, dance hall, restaurant, clam house, a hotel, and even a theater at one point. Another point of attraction was Riverview Gardens, which was introduced in 1895 and was advertised as a cool and delightful shore resort, and offered music, dancing, amusement, games, catering, and many fun community events until its sale in 1926. A final example is Bliffin's Beach, which was a popular destination for swimming lessons, swimming races, and other events. There was originally only one public school in Steep Brook in 1811, until a second was built in 1878. Both suffered from lack of resources. The Wiley School opened in 1912 to accommodate students from other overcrowded schools and ironically stands empty today. Steep Brook was the early center of the land acquired in the Freetown Purchase, and the community established the first Congregational Church, circa 1714 on North Main Street in Steep Brook. In 1803, Fall River separated from Freetown, and the first congregation relocated to downtown Fall River in a new structure built in 1816. Steep Brook residents established the North Christian Church in 1842 and the North Methodist Episcopal Church in 1854 after the center of town shifted from Steep Brook to downtown Fall River. Federal-style buildings are one of the earliest surviving architectural styles found in Steep Brook. Victorian styles like the Italianate, Queen Anne, and Greek Revival houses along North Main Street were built by men who had come into prosperity from the textile mills of the mid-19th century. Double houses and multi-family houses emerged for the working class.
So now that we've discussed some of the broader historical trends in Steep Brook and Fall River, we'd like to look at some specifics that stood out to us. To start, Steep Brook features a significant number of surviving pre-industrial and colonial-era houses. Although their historic integrity is in some cases compromised, their survival is a testament to Steep Brook's lack of urban development. Unlike the areas closest to downtown Fall River, Steep Brook has seen more modest commercial and industrial activity, which contributes to the character of the area. Steep Brook stands out from the rest of Fall River, where the majority of pre-industrial properties have been demolished. While surveying Steep Brook, we discovered that a number of the area's commercial buildings have been lost. Steep Brook was a commercial center in the late 19th century and early 20th century, and these losses have severely impacted the integrity of its character. We believe the picture on the right is where Wilson Road intersects North Main Street, which was the commercial center of the neighborhood. The photo on the left is of the ferry slip at the end of Wilson Road, which was previously used as a wharf by Barnabas Clark. As mentioned before, Barnabas Clark had a number of commercial and industrial buildings spread across Steep Brook. His gristmill, blacksmith shop, and ice house have all been lost to us. At one point, there have been 6 markets and a post office in Steep Brook, but these structures, along with the railroad depot, have all been lost. Additionally, Steep Brook has lost parts of its character that attracted people to it from other areas. Most of these have already been discussed, such as Bliffin's Beach and Riverview Gardens. During our research of Steep Brook, we found some interesting stories. The North Methodist Episcopal Church, which will be discussed in more detail later, lost its steeple and was rehabilitated into a single-family dwelling. James H. Wilson, who lived in the Green Dragon Inn and founded an omnibus service to transport citizens between the north and south sides of the city, was a descendant of Roger Wilson, who helped fit out the Mayflower. Census records have shown us that he eventually died in Butler Asylum in Providence. One of the properties we researched twice caught fire from a passing train bound for Boston as well. So of the 32 buildings researched by this class, there are already 4 that are currently listed on the National Register. 3775 North Main Street is a federal Cape style building built circa 1800. It is named for William Collins, who acted as a master mariner in Steep Brook from the early to mid-19th century. It was nominated under Criterion A for its association with the early development of Steep Brook as an agricultural center, as well as Criterion C because it is a rare survival of a pre-industrial building in Steep Brook. 3538 North Main Street is the North Christian Congregational Church, built in 1842, in the Greek Revival style with Gothic Revival features. The church has lost much of its integrity over the years, but it is a rare surviving church within the neighborhood, and is one of the few remaining public buildings in Steep Brook. The church was nominated under Criterion A for its early association with Steep Brook's religious history, and under Criterion C for its Greek and Gothic Revival features. 3063 North Main Street was built in the mid to late 18th century and is thought to be one of Fall River's oldest buildings. The house was nominated under Criterion A for being one of the earliest remaining houses in Fall River, and under Criterion C for its Georgian architectural features. 2634 North Main Street is also known as the Squire William Barnabas Kennedy House. The house was built in the Federal style in 1806 and may have served as a station on the Underground Railroad, though further research is needed to confirm this. This house was nominated under Criterion A for its association with pre-industrial development in Fall River, and under Criterion C as a distinctive example of the Federal style.
Of the 32 buildings we surveyed, we determined that 4 more of them may be eligible for listing on the National Register. 2585 North Main Street, otherwise known as the William J. Wiley School, is a classical revival style 9-room schoolhouse constructed in 1911 to help remedy overcrowding in the Steep Brook, Border City, and Borden schools. The William J. Wiley School appears eligible for listing on the National Register for its association with a pattern of school construction in early 20th century Fall River, as well as for its architectural significance as a well-preserved early 20th century classical revival schoolhouse. 3100 North Main Street, called the Mercy Winslow House, was constructed by the Winslow family as a single-family house around 1900. The Mercy Winslow House appears eligible for listing for its architectural significance as a well-preserved Queen Anne-style residence from the turn of the 20th century. 3562 North Main Street was constructed in the early 19th century and appears eligible for listing under Criterion C as a rare surviving half house, featuring minimal alterations and a fully surviving facade. 4042 North Main Street was constructed in 1785 and was owned by several generations of farmers, including Revolutionary War Battalion Captain Jale Hathaway, who reportedly built the house. It serves as an example of the early linear development of Steep Brook that we still see today. This home appears to be eligible for the National Register under Criterion A for its association with the pre-industrial agricultural practices of Steep Brook, as well as under Criterion C as an example of the Federal style. We only surveyed a small number of properties in the area and did not fully research Steep Brook's eligibility for listing as a historic district. However, the next section of the presentation discusses properties in the neighborhood that could contribute to a potential historic district. 3576 North Main Street is potentially eligible as a contributing property to a historic district under Criterion A for its association with the pre-industrial agrarian development of Steep Brook, and under Criterion C as a rare 18th century survival, an example of the Cape form in the neighborhood, though its modernized features and material updates diminish its historic integrity. The house at 3325 North Main Street, built around 1800, could contribute to a historic district as an example of the pre-industrial Federal style in Fall River, though it has also lost integrity over the years.
Some of the buildings we surveyed, while not apparently eligible for listing on the National Register, shed light on the history of the neighborhood. Many of them have very little integrity, but still warrant mention. 3079 North Main Street was constructed around 1910, and it consisted of tenement housing and a basement store that sold products such as ice cream, soda, candy, groceries, and tobacco into the 1930s. The house at 3247 North Main Street is associated with the major industrial ventures of Barnabas Clark, which reflect the pattern of development in Steep Brook during the last half of the 19th century. Clark was the first person to live in this house, which is located just to the west of the clay pits that he mined while living here, after discovering clay in Steep Brook. He was also prominently involved in Fall River's late 19th century ice dealing business. Clark's blacksmith business was located right next door to his house to the south. 3262 North Main Street was known as the Green Dragon Inn. The house was owned by Joe Wilson, a prominent member of the community who founded the North Methodist Episcopal Church, petitioned for a new road in Steep Brook, and constructed a wharf at the end of Wilson Road. The house was later owned and lived in by Barnabas Clark. The house sat at the center of Steep Brook's commercial district and was owned and lived in by some of the most prominent members of the community. It is possible that the house is older than it appears and underwent significant physical changes at some point in history. Therefore, it should be researched further. 3282 North Main Street served as a post office from the 1870s to the early 1900s when it became a market, first known as the James A. Blake Market and then Wilson Road Market through the 1950s. At some point in the 1970s, the property was renovated into a home and is now apartments. The building at 3338 North Main Street is the North Methodist Episcopal Church. It is related to two historical trends in Fall River's history. The North Methodist Episcopal Church was built in between the Second and Third Great Awakenings, which helped grow the Methodist faith in Fall River. It also attests to the building of Greek Revival and Italianate houses on North Main Street in the mid-19th century as a direct result of further economic wealth and population growth that came from Fall River's textile mills. The William Z. Kennedy House at 3484 and 3494 North Main Street was built circa 1897. The property seems to have always been a multifamily house. The house was owned and occupied by William Z. Kennedy, a first mate who worked on the Fall River line of steamships for over 40 years. The original property seems to have extended down to the river where he owned a sailboat for recreational use. When William died, all the ships on the Fall River line lowered their flags to half-mast.
There are several historic contexts in Steep Brook that warrant further study. More research could be done into the commerce and small-scale industry that was present along North Main Street, especially at the town center intersection with Wilson Road. There is also not a lot known about the ice harvesting industries, clay mining, or agriculture. We know that these industries were present, but don't know many details about them, like what crops were farmed here, where the farms were actually located, or if there's still evidence of the farms here, for example. More research into why a train depot was built in Steep Brook would help to explain the importance of Steep Brook in the terms of the Old Colony Railroad and the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad Company. It is also unclear as to Steep Brook's importance in terms of maritime industries. Though there was evidence that the railroad ran through Steep Brook, or that wharves were built for trade, it is unclear as to what was used for transportation of goods, or what was used for people, or what was actually transported. More research on the various recreational beaches and entertainment areas that once served not only Steep Brook, but Fall River as well, would give us more information on the character and life in Steep Brook. This could also be accomplished with research into more property-specific queries, such as the connection between the Kennedy House and the Underground Railroad, or how buildings such as the North Episcopal Methodist Church served the community. Finally, research should be done on the greater events in Fall River's history, such as the hurricane of 1938 or the closing of the textile mills and how Steep Brook was affected. Comparing the developments in Steep Brook with Fall River and other local areas would also be beneficial.
The research conducted for this presentation is just a starting point for surveying in this area. We recommend that a larger and much more comprehensive study be conducted, which would also include properties that are now age eligible for the National Register. We mentioned some properties that could contribute to a National Register historic district, but we did not do further work to establish potential district boundaries or other contributors. It is recommended that an evaluation of Steep Brook and its eligibility as a historic district be further researched. There's also more work that could be done to bring awareness to the Steep Brook district. Interviewing residents and former residents of the neighborhood and collecting oral histories from them is one way to not only bring awareness to the importance of the neighborhood to the residents, but also to shed light on an important component of Fall River's history. Additionally, redesignating or branding the neighborhood as Steep Brook would serve to continue its narrative and to connect the current neighborhood with its past. To spread awareness about Steep Brook, the research that has been conducted on the neighborhood through this effort could be made accessible to the public through the efforts of the Historical Commission, perhaps in partnership with the Fall River Public Library or the Fall River Historical Society. The owners of the studied historic houses in Steep Brook could also be sent the research compiled on their homes. Other ways to raise awareness include a marker program for the historic properties and annual tours highlighting these properties and the history of the general neighborhood in Steep Brook. We would like to thank you all for the opportunity to present our findings to you. We hope that this will be a starting place for further preservation efforts in the Steep Brook area. Thank you for your time tonight, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to try and answer them for you.
Thank you very much. So, yes.
No, I'm,
Oh, okay.
thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Another good
This is fascinating.
presentation. It's my second go-around with that presentation. It's still wonderful. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the board as well as anyone in the audience if they have any questions for the students at all.
No, I'll just have a thought. How are you planning on publication and disseminating the research findings? Have you been in touch with anyone?
Well, we're submitting them to the commission for the submission. To the historical commission. We've certainly publicized the fact that we've been working on it, but at this point, I think we'd be happy to talk with the commission more about how to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions at all for the students at all?
Yeah, I did. So I know the scope of this is bigger than, I don't want to say just the property, because you did a ton of work, but I'm curious, how many other properties do you think are worth surveying in the area in the future?
I guess we would pull from our sections of, I guess, you mean in addition to the properties, I guess.
Well, I think the goals of this were to sort of update existing survey that, for underdocumented properties, because, those earlier forms from the 1980 surveys, they were, trying to do the whole state, so they were working fast. So, there are, what did we say, there's 60-ish or so properties that have already been surveyed that have very minimal information on them. And so our goals here were to give better documentation for the properties that had already been surveyed, including the ones that were listed on the National Register, because they literally have like one page, right, and like a little paragraph, right? But I think there's another 40 years of properties that have sort of aged into the system in this neighborhood. There's been a lot of development that's sort of interstitial between this sort of the Wilson Road kind of clump of resources and maybe the hilltop where the church is kind of, the first settlement site kind of clump of resources. So, there's at least another 45 that are already surveyed and need more work. And then, if you were to do a really good kind of, I would say a good, casting a net to cover, your whole potential universe. We didn't estimate that, but it's at least as many more. So
I can probably help you there. There are 22 more buildings in the area that date back to the 18th century and 19th. There are 22 more. And you you did go after 22 buildings and found 32 that were within that realm. So the same would happen again. On our significant structures list, there's still 22 buildings that have not been really documented. So
there's some really interesting development that seems to happen as downtown is decentralizing a little. We see, like the Queen Anne house you saw there, and there's some other houses on some of the side streets where it's clear that some of the sort of skilled sort of managers and you know, skilled labor is deciding that maybe living downtown is not what they want anymore, and they're building some kind of nice houses out in what's the kind of urban edge. And with the streetcar going up there and then automobiles, you know, they have a commercial district there. So, you know, there's certainly, we see some other trends that are kind of interesting in thinking about, you know, the full history of this place.
Any other questions at all for presenters? Yes. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the front, please, and stating your name as well, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi, Alexander Silva, 148 Purchase Street. Great job with the research. I was just wondering what you were most surprised about in your research for the neighborhood and finding.
I know for me, it's just, you know, picturing the first day when we drove through Steep Brook and we're taking our initial photos, to think of that as the center of Fall River at any point was very, very hard to believe. There are a lot of missing pieces to, you know, the different recreational venues that we read about, and, you know, the wharves. So reading about all these things that used to exist and either don't exist now, or they're, you know, very subtle remnants of them, were very surprising. And the amount of activity, especially that we learned in articles published about Fall River. You know, it was a very vibrant community and they had a lot of events going on.
Yeah, I guess just very similar, because we were also just talking about this like on the car ride over here about like just how we were surprised about all this. But also I did the 3247 North Main Street with like Barnabas Clark, and that was one of the ones I researched. And I remember going there, and it's like a little like one-story building, and I was just like, okay, like I don't know what history this is gonna have, but it looks really modern now. It's been like redone, like okay. And then finding out that like he was so prominent there with like the clay pits and like the wharves and like creating this clay industry, and then he also had the ice industries, and it was just like, to picture that all happening like from that place was just like, wait, this is such a small little like house that seems just like this modern little house now. So I mean, we obviously don't know what the interior looks like or anything anymore, but I just thought that was kind of really interesting to me.
One of the houses that I specifically researched was the Kennedy House, that the original documentation that we were looking at, the original building form there, mentioned its connection with the Underground Railroad, but it wasn't super detailed, so I wanted to do more research into that. So I was, you know, surprised. I'm not super familiar with the area, so I was surprised to learn that there was, that Fall River did, you know, play such a prominent role in the Underground Railroad. But I was also surprised because the more so, you know, it stood out to me that this was the documentation, you know, maybe wasn't the original documentation, maybe wasn't as thorough, or, you know, maybe I just wasn't able to find the piece that I was looking for. But, you know, it definitely kind of emphasized the importance of this project that we were doing to go and, you know, update these forms and find out where they fell short before, just so that we can have, you know, an even more thorough understanding of the community.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions at all for the group? All right. I'd like to turn it over to Rick. We have some citations to present.
Yeah. We have citations from the city council, the mayor from the city, and also the mayor is going to read off a citation from the state. So, Mr. Raposo?
Good evening to all of you. My name is Andrew Raposo. I'm a member of the Fall River City Council. On behalf of the council, I'll present this official city council citation to Professor Stiles and your team. It reads, "Be it resolved, the city council hereby extends its commendation to Professor Stiles and the team, the professor of historical preservation at Roger Williams University, in recognition for your impressive work with your students to document and record historically significant structures in the 17 and 1800s in the Steep Brook area. Be it further resolved that the Fall River City Council extend best wishes for your continued success, and the resolution be entered the record of the City Council adopted April 23rd, 2024, proposed by Vice President Linda Pereira and signed by President Joseph Camara. Congratulations. And
Thank you.
Job well done. Thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I have one that's not mine, it's from the state representatives. We have three. Alan's the only one on it, but I'm sure Carol Faiola and Paul Schmidt would also support this in recognition of Dr. Stiles. You and your students work in documenting historically significant structures within the Steep Brook area of Fall River, allowing Fall River Historical Commission to officially list and maintain these and preserve these historical presence. It's signed by the Speaker of the House, Ron Marinaro, and I want to make sure you get that.
Thank you very much.
I have one for all the kids listed there, so I'll give you, I'm not reading all these, because I will sound like the whole presentation. I rolled those streets a ton of times, and it's funny to see it in that context. We just thought it was an old house, so that one's being renovated. So in honor and recognition of the work conducted by you and the Roger Williams students, documenting these historic properties in the Steep Brook area in the city of Fall River, signed by me, Paul Coogan, the mayor for the city of Fall River. That one's for you.
Thank you.
They all say the same. This is the
Thank you.
You do know, just so everybody knows, these people are not from Fall River. And, one poor soul got lost from Alabama. The rest are at least New England or semi-New England. Now, the only name I'm not sure of, I know Elizabeth Brown, I remember that one, but your name was?
Aaron.
I got it, okay. Elizabeth, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Aaron's is right here. Congratulations, thanks for your help.
Thank you.
And of course, all the kids listed are Chloe, Oliver, Benjamin, Cameron, Charles. You can tell I'm the mayor because I put him the wrong way. Nathaniel, Andrew, and Jason. For their efforts to do this. I hope you come back and do another section of the city. We really, really appreciate your help. And the presentation taught me more than I knew, and that's how I look at things. So again, give these to the other guys, and thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. And from the board as well, I would like to thank you for all the work that went into researching this area of the city. And I too am not from Fall River, and I find as I'm going through looking at all the documented buildings and doing a little bit more research, I'm realizing how much has not actually been determined. Whether it's an architect, whether it's the exact year a building was constructed, and who was associated with it. You talked about, was it Forest Hills, for example, and then the Globe Street Railway, which those were tied together with one individual, that was George Mellon, who created, or at least established, the Globe Street Railway from the other streetcar lines in the city, and then as a not successful venture wanted to create a kind of like picnic grove of sorts at Forest Hills, and he later established the Mellon Hotel downtown. So these are things that, it's connecting the dots with significant people in the city. And the Underground Railroad, which that is quite extensive. I know the preservation it's endless. So this is a great start to what we hope will be, as our board, we want to focus on updating the resources that we do have in the city. We have, as I mentioned, we have a lot in the city that has not been documented, whether it's a full neighborhood and even the North End, really, part of the Highlands neighborhood and the North End area that warrant this type of investigation. So this is something that we, as the Historical Commission, will be looking at for the long term. It'll be an ongoing project. Yes.
And this is a good shot in the arm for us to help promote in the city. This presentation is going to be used extensively. We're probably going to pull some sort of a gathering together with the Steeper Brook neighborhood and present this particular presentation. And we're looking to expand the Highlands District. So we're going to use a presentation like this to say, you know, this is why we want to preserve the neighborhood so that history can be here and we don't need someone to go back and try and rewrite it for us. Okay, and maybe for a little humor, if you date back, you know, what impressed me the most, Bliffin's Beach. When I was a little guy, my parents took me there, and I remember the diving boards. They had these huge boards, one maybe, I don't know the heights, but 10 feet, 15. People used to jump off, and I remember that, you know, so. That's going back a little bit, but I'm not going to tell you my age.
Is there anything that?
Well, just, you will never be able to go down North Main Street again without knowing every inch of the area. So you own this now. And we're very grateful that you've done this work.
Yes. Thank you. We're very appreciative. So, wonderful. Well,
You want a motion to adjourn?
I think so, yes. So it is 6:40 p.m. We will be meeting next on, I don't have the date, it's the third Tuesday of May, but our next meeting will be
20th.
The 20th, thank you, of May. So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:40 p.m.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Rick and Connie, motion by Rick, second by Connie. Roll call, Ashley,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Rick,
Rick Mancini, yes.
Joyce, oh, sorry, Connie.
Yes.
Joyce,
Yes?
and Jason Bouchard Naraki, yes. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your food. Thank you.
Good job, very impressive.
It's the
Really
best meeting
nice.
we've had in a long